Hi, everybody. Welcome. Suzanne and Eric, thank you. What an honor to have that support. You know, as an artist, it's very meaningful. And you know what we're working to do here is to create community around something, around shared experience, and to create understanding through this mutual experience, right? Which I think if we can agree on anything that even the last 3 days have shown us, that we need this. We need it a lot, right? Anyway, that's one of the things that we're up to here, and using this device called opera to do that. And so tonight's a really special one because of what Annie just talked about, and also because we're going to have a little different approach here. We have one of the leading Verdi sopranos in the world here tonight, and you're going to hear her sing and then also hear directly from her. We're going to do a little chat about Verdi, her experience singing it around the world. And so I'm really excited about this format. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Verdi himself. Of course, you know, I try and avoid stuff that you can just look up on Wikipedia here. But you know, I will give you a little snapshot. So if you put yourself in 1860s Italy, Maestro Giuseppe Verdi is famous, very, very famous, throughout Italy and all of Europe. Not Beyonce famous, but famous. You know, we think of Verdi's powerful scores and these riveting characters, but he wasn't just a composer. He farmed a little bit. He was involved in local politics. And he often used his operas to talk about, to carry political and social messages. And because of that, he was subject to censorship a lot. For example, if you've ever seen his opera Un ballo in maschera, a masked ball, do you know where it's placed? Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, which of course he didn't know anything about, really. But it was originally Sweden, and because, you know, then the censors were like, well, you can't do that because you're talking about killing the king. So he's like, okay, I'll move it to Boston, which of course doesn't have a king. I was just there last week, and they still don't have a king. You know, so this is something that he was considered a national hero for taking on some of these subjects and doing it in such an artful way. And he was also such a gifted melodist. We all know this, right? And there's the old anecdote about when they were rehearsing Rigoletto, that he wrote this aria called La Donna Mobile. La Donna Mobile, yeah. And this is where the Duke is talking about how fickle women are and deriding them. But it's a great tune. And they rehearsed it in great secrecy. In fact, the tenor who was rehearsing it wasn't even allowed to hum it in the street on his way home from the theater because they knew that it would be such a hit tune. And so we think of all of these things when we're you know, thinking about this. And so after all of this, why would he do a Requiem? Right? You're a star of the most important art form in Italy in the 19th century. You're at the top of the game, okay? You know, there's some reason to believe from his correspondence that he thought after Aida, he might be done writing for the theater. Fortunately, he wasn't. We'll get to that a little bit later. But this is coming into what's called the late period of Verdi. So we think of the middle period as Rigoletto, Traviata, Trovatore. Okay, so those all came within about 4 years of each other. Pretty fast pace for that kind of work. And that's what really vaulted him to kind of the height of fame where he was. But this Requiem came up in a little bit of an odd way, in that there was this Italian writer who had also written some libretti called Alessandro Manzoni, died. And he was beloved by many composers. And so they had this thought, well, you know what, why don't 7 of us write a Requiem for this composer and do it? And I don't know if you've ever tried to work with one composer at a time. 7 is, I don't know, you know, I mean, a valiant idea, but one's not surprised to know that that really quickly went off the rails and disappeared as a project. But Verdi had already written his part of it, and he had submitted it. And so he came back to it, and we see letters between him and his publisher, Ricordi, saying, you know, I think I want to do something with this. And thankfully he did. And there's some, of course, key differences here. He wasn't writing sacred work before. He was taking stories or plays or things and having a librettist turn it into something and setting it to music in these sprawling dramas. But nonetheless, he decided that this was something that he had to do. He put a lot of work into it. It was premiered in 1874 in a church in Milan and conducted by Verdi himself. One interesting anecdote about that performance is that women were not allowed to sing in the church openly at that time. And so they had to be veiled. The female choristers had to be behind a veil to perform. But it was well received, and not just well received, but immediately demanded more performances throughout Europe. And then in 1877, its first American performance was at Carnegie Hall. So we know a little bit about the place. And I'm sure you know some of these tunes. Like, I was watching the national championship football game, and you hear the marching band from Notre Dame play this all the time. They didn't play it enough to help the team win, but sorry, Fighting Irish. So that's the Dies Irae. That we experience at a few different junctures throughout the piece, and in more than just that key. So there are a lot of these tunes that you're already going to know. And why is this Requiem that he wrote so enshrined in musical history, and one that's worthy of our attention as an opera company? And this is unique because it blends Verdi's mastery of the dramatic operatic style with this traditional structure of a Catholic Mass for the dead. And it's a highly emotional and expressive work. And remember, liturgical music at this point was not that way, right? Mozart wrote a pretty fiery one back in the day, but most of this was considered to be quite restrained music. It didn't really have the highs and lows that we're used to hearing from Verdi. So it's really magical to hear all of these things come together. It's also important because it represented a shift in how liturgical and sacred music, which we have to use sacred in a loose term when we're talking about music, because not all of these composers actually had any sort of relationship directly, with the divine as part of their personal practice, but there was a devoutness to it nonetheless. And but this really shifted the way that composers thought about setting some of these texts, right? And then we can see in musical history that Gustav Mahler and Benjamin Britten and a lot of these people, sort of take cues from what Verdi did in this piece. So with that little introduction, I just want to introduce my guest for the evening, and I'm just going to read a little bit, she's going to come out and you're just going to be like, oh man, she's just the most real person ever. Which she is, but she's described by the New York Times as possessing an agile coloratura technique and a feeling for the Italianate style. And she has established herself as a leading Verdi soprano. She also sings Puccini beautifully, etc. She was a grand finals winner of the Metropolitan Opera Council auditions. She was at BBC Cardiff Singer of the World, where she was a finalist in the song competition. Throughout her career, she's portrayed a lot of iconic heroines, including Aida, Leonora in Trovatore, Desdemona in Otello, and Liu in Turandot, at opera houses like the Metropolitan Opera, San Francisco Opera, and countless others around the globe. She has done this piece that she will perform with us next week, the Verdi Requiem, with prestigious orchestras around the world, notably with Riccardo Muti and the Chicago Symphony and the LA Philharmonic and Gustavo Dudamel. Speaking of Dudamel, they also made a recording of Mahler 8 together that was nominated for a Grammy a couple years ago. We are very fortunate that she now has her main residence in Austin. She is a lecturer in vocal arts at the Butler School of Music, imparting her extensive knowledge. And this is really important because I can tell you, to have a teacher in graduate school who's actually doing the thing they are teaching you is really, really meaningful. And I can tell you from personal experience that it was that way for me when I was in graduate school. So these are very, very fortunate students. The first selection that Leah will sing for us this evening is from one of her signature roles, and that is Aida. And this is Aida's Act 1 scene, Ritorna Vincitor. She's just heard this said, and she proclaims it. And she's in this no-win situation because she's in love with Rodimus. But she knows that conflicts with her love for her father and her people. And so the second part of it is begging God, the gods, numi pietà, to have pity on her. So please welcome Leah Crocetto and pianist James Maverick.
Ricordo
That should be on.
Hi.
Hey, yeah, it's
How
on.
are you doing?
I'm really happy to see you, and
Me too.
I'm happy to be doing this together. You know, you've done the Verdi Requiem several times. It's my first. Isn't that great?
I didn't know.
It is.
Oh, I'm so
I know.
happy
So
for
it's
you.
Verdi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you know that my Requiem with Dudamel was also his first?
Really?
Yeah,
See,
in LA.
good company.
For sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
For sure.
But no, it's Verdi that brought us together.
Yes.
And with Verdi, we continue. The first thing we ever did together was Trovatore.
Yeah, rehearsing in a pet shop.
That's right. Those were the good old days. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. But you know, my takeaway from that was, I think you know, we both sense this. I think of like, you know, there are artists you work with, and you're like, I get this person, right? Or like, and that was when you were behind. I mean, the singers were behind me, and it's a scary piece to do like that. Yeah. But I mean, there was just this sort of immediate trust, I think, and it felt really good.
I think because we both liked baseball too.
That's right. I mean, you can always relate over sports, right? So, have you done more Verdi than any other composer?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And what was the first one?
Trovatore was my very first. Not with you.
Yeah.
That was my second. My first Trovatore was in Bordeaux, in France, and it was the only. I always tell my students this. They're always like, I just want to be perfect. I want to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you're never going to feel perfect. There's only going to be maybe one performance in your entire career that you're going to think, oh, yeah, that was the one. For me, that was my Trovatore in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
But now I listen to it, and I'm like, that was not great. But in the moment, it was, they applauded me for like 20 minutes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And I have a recording of it, and it was listening.
So if you're feeling down, you just play that.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
If I feel like I suck, I put that on, and I'm like, they like me.
I wanted to start with this Aida because this is a signature role for you. You've done it, all over the world, but it's very personal for you. And you just did the last performances of this. Has anybody seen Aida at the Met before this season? The Sonia Friesel production that was for about 35 years. It was absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I ever saw at the Met.
Oh.
And it's the only time I heard Pavarotti sing live. Wow. And I was like a college kid from Kansas, and I was like, what is going on? And the set was gigantic. And so I was so thrilled to see you doing those last performances of just such an iconic production. I mean, what is that like with that production and on that stage? I could bring us into what that feels like.
No pressure at all. No, I felt a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it was just last season. So or two seasons, sort of. Yeah. Like less than a year ago, though. But I felt like I had a huge responsibility because it was such an iconic production, but also Aida is a role that I can roll out of bed and sing because I've done close to 85 performances of it. And so it was okay that I didn't have a huge rehearsal time, which rarely happens that you get a good rehearsal time when you're not doing a new production. So I'll never forget the first time I was on the set for the Triumphal March. Tim, I felt like I was standing on the pyramids. It was so big. I was in awe. And I did the Zeffirelli Turandot there as well, which is also giant and cripplingly old. It's like there are holes in the set. And God bless James Morris. He came and he showed me where all the holes were.
There you go.
He's like, don't step there, you'll die. So, but the Aida at the Met was incredible. It was an experience I'll never forget, and one that I'm so grateful I got to have. And the recording is still on the Met player. So if you care to take a listen to the last performance of the Friesel, it's there. Yeah, and the production is awe-inspiring. I mean, it is stunning. I mean, when you did it, did they have an elephant or just a camel? There's horses and chariots. Horses, no elephant.
No elephant.
No,
okay.
Just a camel.
I think they had a budget cut. The elephant was But it's that like scale of production. We're not joking about that. So now onto Requiem.
Yeah.
So you're obviously very established in this piece.
Yeah.
And what is this for you? And can you contrast it? Because I thought this is interesting because this comes right after Aida.
Yeah.
Or a little, I mean, there's some years, but
but
it's the piece after Aida.
Yeah.
And for me, when I'm studying the Requiem, there's so much that reminds me of Aida. Like, it's just certain scenes I can be like, I hear this, I hear that. So, but what is it like for you navigating between these two very different things?
Verdi threw the kitchen sink at the Requiem. It's literally every single trick that he has is in there. And I don't even know, it cheapens it to call them tricks because they're not tricks. They're intelligent moments in music. And when you sing the Verdi Requiem, you have to be able to sing things like Trovatore, you have to be able to sing Otello, you have to be able to sing Louisa Miller, you have to be, and he expects the soprano specifically to be able to do everything. And it's mean. But it's also a really fulfilling night of singing, and the duets with the soprano and the mezzo, specifically the Ricordare, that is maybe my favorite moment in the piece because the harmonies are so tight and we cross voices and it's wonderful. And speaking of duets with mezzos, the duet with Amneris and Aida is another, probably my favorite moment besides the father-daughter duet.
Right.
But probably my favorite moment to sing in Aida as well. So he expects a lot of me.
Yeah. I got a little ahead of myself. I just want to take one step back.
Sure.
You've done more Verdi than everything else. By far your favorite composer. But can you tell us why? Like if we're talking about, okay, you've done Liu and Turandot a lot, right?
Yeah.
So you're very well versed in Puccini, but what is it about this guy for you?
Verdi lends himself to be, it's a very healthy way of singing. When I sing Verdi, I have to channel Mozart, I have to channel all the great bel canto composers, and I would border Verdi early stuff as bel canto as well. Actually, probably right up until the Requiem, he's sort of stuck with the traditional bel canto formula. It keeps my voice young. I think probably because I'm a competitive person and I'm the most competitive with myself, and because Verdi asks me to do everything in every role that he wrote for me. See what I did there? He wrote them for me.
Yes.
I feel that deep in my soul. But thanks for picking that up. I didn't realize I was making the joke until it was already out of my mouth. But because of all those factors, I feel like I'm connected to Verdi, and it's my music, and it's in my blood and in my veins, and it teaches you so much about, or it taught me, I can't speak for anybody else, but it taught me so much about who I am as a person. It taught me how to be courageous, because there is nothing more naked than singing the Libera Me in Verdi Requiem, the high floaty part with the a cappella with the chorus behind you. I have nightmares about that moment. And when Tim asked me to do this, I was like, sure, but not that part. So I think that's why, because he's so demanding, and I'm demanding. So I like it. We bonded.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's interesting to look at Verdi, like what you're saying about sort of where he makes a shift in his career. It was very bel canto in the beginning. So when we talk about bel canto, we're talking about the period, Rossini, Bellini, Donizetti. These composers we refer to as the bel canto period because they were writing really beautiful melodies for the human voice that were that had accompaniment, but the accompaniment was cha-cha-cha, more these types of figures. Nothing, and the orchestration was not complex.
Not at all.
It was kind of very utilitarian's not fair to say, but it was not the priority.
Percussive. It's percussive. It's to keep the beat and the intonation, and that's about it.
Yeah. And so in looking at Verdi, I think, it's Rigoletto where he really starts orchestrating, right?
Yeah.
It's the first time he really writes unique material for French horns. We hear them, especially like in the storm scene and places like that. We hear the horns. There are things that he does, like Gilda in the beginning. She's always accompanied by the flute, right? After she loses her innocence, she's accompanied by the oboe. And so we see Verdi making these moves through his middle period, where he's really thinking a lot more about orchestration and how it impacts the dramatism of a piece, and how the orchestra starts to become its own voice, right? But then we get through Aida, and this is, very, very much orchestrated. He's using the maximum range of the orchestra from very, very. Even if we think about the prelude, like very small, sort of intimate sounds, to sort of the roaring sounds, that, in Act 2, or Act 3 duet with Daddy. Yeah, also. But this is a very different thing, and then to launch into Requiem, and I wanted to ask you, what is it like to sing Verdi in Latin text versus in Italian? And I did a little sort of back of the envelope calculation today. The libretto to Aida has around 6,000 words. It took me a while. Yeah. Then if somebody come to my office, I'd have to start over, and it was just bad. But the Verdi Requiem has around 750 words. Right, because this is a defined text. He did some things with the format of it to kind of change it up a little bit. He sort of reintroduces some things. He adjusts the sequences a little bit. But generally, this is the format. He's working in this format that had been for centuries.
Yeah.
So we have that, right? That there's he's having to express a lot of things, very little text. It's still 85 minutes long or something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what it's like to sing Latin on these melodies you're used to singing Italian, and is it different? And then the next part I want to ask you is that when you're repeating text like this, or it's coming back, how do you interpret that? How do you approach that as an artist? But let's go first, how does it feel to sing?
So for me, this is true Latin. It's true, it's a pretty much Italian Latin. If that makes sense. It is true. It's not influenced by, there's Germanic Latin as well. There's Spanish Latin. This is not that. Everything is pronounced the way you would pronounce Italian pretty much. So for me, I don't notice a huge difference in that. But I do notice it's a much more reverent feel, I think, because of the academic language that it has. There's a more stoicism to it. It's character-driven, though, but it's not character-driven in the sense that you don't see the relationships between the other singers. So you're not getting that texture in the text, but you are getting harmonic conversation and specifically the soprano in the Salvame. She's mad. She's crazy. The soprano in the Verdi Requiem the whole thing is a mad scene for her. Right up to the Liberame at the end, where she just can't take it anymore. That's how I think of it. She has a true arc. And the calming moments are the motherly mezzo going, ricordare, pace, pace. It's like calming the girl down. And the tenors just doing what tenors do.
That's a hard thing too. Yeah, that's
the tenors are yeah. But I roll at them because I'm like, they have two moments that will either nail them to the wall or give them great success, and we were just talking about that, the Hostias and the Ingemisko, and they're one right after the other. Thankfully, I've never seen anyone crash and burn on stage, which has been great. But that's how I would describe that.
So there's a real dramatic arc for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because as I've been studying, I've been going through, and there are points where it's very clear to me that, the basses introduce something kind of terrifying, right? And then the rest of the chorus is like pleading almost against this. There's this great tension for it.
And you feel that right in the beginning with the ultra quiet strings that come in, and you're like, are they really playing? You kind of lean forward, and you're like, but that he wants that uncomfort, that discomfort, you know?
Yeah, I think so. And he puts all these interesting markings in. What you're talking about is the winds don't play for the first, minute or ish, a little more probably. In my tempo, slow tempo, I don't know. It's interesting how but he marks things in different ways than he never has. There's all these markings, like he maybe before in operas he wrote 2 P's. So when we said that, P being the marking for piano, for soft in Italian, or forte, which means strong, and so, but he writes sometimes 3 or 4, right? Brutal. And he'll say like sottovoce, like under the voice, or these interesting expression markings that I've never seen in a Verdi score before.
Yeah, sometimes I see those markings and I really want to wake him up and slap him.
But it's so cool to get these colors, like you're talking about at the very beginning. I mean, he instructs the chorus to murmur the first time they say Requiem. Yeah. And so it's this really haunting sound that you get right away. What was the second part of that question I asked you? So we were talking about Latin. Oh, and then about, when you kind of got to it talking about a dramatic arc. In this.
Yeah, it's I think I said it all. I look at the mezzo sort of as my comfort, my sister, my pal, my mom, my aunt, one of those things. And then we're the family, and then the tenor and the bass are kind of like the messengers. One is a messenger of hope, and the other is a messenger of death. And I think you can probably think, the bass is the death, the tenor's the hope. With the hostias, when that moment comes in, the soprano and the mezzo are singing backup,
Yeah, in every new line of text, he introduces every new line.
And it's a stunning moment.
In the tenor voice, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a person of faith?
Yeah, big time.
And how does that play in? Because, like I mentioned earlier to our friends here, that, some of these composers, who wrote requiems or other sacred pieces that was not part of their daily practice, right? Like Fauré, for example, wrote a requiem, did not believe in God, right?
Verdi
he wrote
too.
A beautiful one.
Verdi's an atheist.
Right.
He was or agnostic, I guess, because he knew there was something there, but didn't know what necessarily.
But I'm curious if you're willing to talk about how
absolutely.
that sort of interacts for you, and how this piece operates for you in your practice of faith.
Well, for me, faith is the cornerstone of how I live my life. It's so that filters into my music as well, and how I portray characters, how I sing. But I also I believe that even if a composer isn't a believer or faith is not their thing, that the text can still be used in a faithful way. I think about the song "You'll Never Walk Alone" by Rodgers and Hammerstein. They weren't believers by any means, but that song has transported me right to heaven at the throne at the feet of Jesus, And I feel like that happens in this piece as well. And actually, in a lot of Verdi pieces, he respects faith and religion, and you heard it in the Aida, and you're going to hear it later in Otello as well. He pays respect to religion and to the faith choice or the walk of faith, which I think is miraculous. It's not touchy, it's not overbearing, it's just there. And I think, for me, God uses all kinds of people. So that's the way I look at it. And
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's interesting to look at this, because another thing we talked about right at the beginning before you came out was, how what we're looking to curate here is shared experience, right? And I don't know if you and I've ever talked about this, but I believe that live performances are miracles, right? Because these are things that have never happened before, will never happen again. This audience has heard me talk about the risk required by the performers and then the audience believing in it also, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's what's really special about the Verdi Requiem is you find a compact thing of everything Verdi, like sort of a culmination of him, where, like you said at the beginning, he puts everything into it. And then he takes us on this journey of wondering and then straight out fear. And then, what's the end of life? What's going to happen? This dies irae that's wild and barbaric and, on the edge of exploding, and all the way to the end and this, or an amen on a major chord after no major chord for a long time, right? And these really magical moments. And so I'm excited to do it with you.
Me too.
And we've got a great cast, a really, really wonderful cast. So can we just cap off Verdi after? So thankfully he didn't stop writing for the theater
because he brought us
two more Otello and Falstaff. And
which are completely different to his other things.
That they are, and they are several years after the Requiem. So you've done Otello a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Desdemona in Otello. So tell us a little bit about this role and what it means to you, because again, this has a sort of religious content to it. I mean, he sings the Ave Maria at the end of the scene in that act with Salce.
Yeah. Desdemona to me is everything good and strong and feminine. It is one of the most miraculous roles ever written, I think. It's not as high in the tessitura as the other Verdi roles. And I think there's an innocence to that. And I think that's why Verdi wrote it the way he did, because he wanted to show her innocence, but also her strength. It's in the best part of the soprano voice that he wrote this role in. And I think a lot of times for me, it took a lot for me to enjoy watching Otello, because I thought for years that the Desdemona was wussy. She was played weak and pathetic, when in reality, she was a strong, loving woman. Now, in my youth, I've always been outgoing and loving, and I'm a hugger. I love to embrace people and meet them where they are. But when I moved to New York for the first time in 2005, my boss, I was waiting tables at the Olive Garden in Times Square. It was horrible. But my boss called me simple. And I went up to her and I was like, Dawn, I'm not simple. I love people. I'm a very strong person. And I stood up for myself. And I made her understand that you don't have to be a New Yorker with resting bitch face to be strong. And I always affiliate that moment with my portrayal of Desdemona, because I think she's one of the strongest characters. It takes a lot to choose love as opposed to appeasement or ease. And I find great strength in portraying her character.
Wow, beautifully said.
Thanks.
Well, we've got one more large musical moment. Shayna. But I just want to, if there are any questions, this is your chance to ask a Verdi soprano. So
anything,
yes.
Bring it.
Yeah, she's open. I mean, okay, all right.
No, nothing. Yeah.
Curious about, you mentioned the lack of faith of Verdi, and yet his music sounds very faithful. And he was probably surrounded by people of faith.
100%.
I would imagine. Would you think that the reason that his music is sounded so religious would be because he didn't have faith, that maybe he wanted it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm
just going to repeat a little bit of
Yeah.
the question for the.
Yeah,
So
please.
this is a really interesting question. How you had mentioned that Verdi was not personally, a person of faith, but he was surrounded by this, and his music certainly, in a lot of ways, indicates, a sense of some sort of divine, if I'm translating this properly. And then what? And so, do you think that he had a longing for something like that?
I think there was definitely something missing in Verdi's life. I think he had a rough relationship with his father, which is why he is so genius in writing father-daughter relationships, actually. And I think he also had a rough relationship with his daughter. So he sort of put those emotions into the music. And I honestly think you can't talk about your children without an acknowledgement or a nod to heaven. I'm not a mother. I have dogs, but but I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, it's like you see, it's their little mirror images of you, and to me, that can only happen with a miracle.
Yeah, it's a very humbling thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Father,
But and I think Verdi was respectful of religion, I think, and faith, and that's why he used the text the way he did, which you'll hear. I'm going to sing a little bit of Otello, and you'll hear the Ave Maria at the end. And he had respect for his people, too, so much so that he didn't want to go into politics. People kept trying to drag him in, like you said, and he just was like, no, I'm going south. So he moved and he composed. But I think he made a lot of poignant statements through his music. And I think those were statements of faith, statements of politic, statements of family, all the things. So does that answer your question? I think he wasn't, I think he was missing something, and I think he found catharsis through his music, because I think we often refer to the muse, and music being its own language and its own way to inspire. I always talk about singing high notes as complete therapy, because you're giving into something divine to make the voice, and trusting the breath and the resonance that you are going to understand what I am giving. And to me, that is profound.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. Let's do Otello, shall we?
Okay.
So maybe can you just sort of read us into where we are on the scene?
Yeah, this is. Some people play it as a mad scene. I don't. I think there's an element of reality and an element of memory, not madness. But this is Desdemona getting ready for bed, but knowing that she's about to die. And there's an element, a little bit of fear that you'll see towards the end, but then that profound, faithful peace by the time we get to the Ave Maria. And she's with her best friend and her handmaid in this scene, which you will have to imagine, because I'm not going to make James sing Emilia. But Emilia's there, sort of helping her with her hair, helping her. She asks Emilia to lay out I'm going to stand because I need to get my body ready. She asks Emilia to lay out her wedding gown in this, the veste nuziale, because that's the sliver of hope that she thinks. She knows something's wrong with Otello and she doesn't know what. So she hopes that when he sees that, he will have a memory and know that she truly loves him and there's nothing going on with Cassio. I mean, thank you. I do need another drink of that. Yeah, so let's do this.
Wow, thank you for that gift. So, Verdi Requiem. This is just going to be something really incredible. About 150 people on stage, between the chorus and the orchestra, 4 world-class soloists, and this is something that, again, is bespoke for you here in Austin. So tell everyone you know. We've still got some tickets available. They're moving quickly, so but get people there. This is really something not to be missed. And thank you for your generosity with us tonight, singing, and just your spirit and your heart. So, yeah, thank you.
This guy's going places. So the fact that, he's going to stay in Austin forever. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying. Like the fact that this is his first Verdi Requiem, I feel honored.
It's going to be a good time. See, you have to be there just for that.
Just
yeah,
for
okay.
That.
Yeah.
And it's live theater, and there are 2 chances, so come both.
That's right, exactly. There you go. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Yeah.